Great stuff. So joining me this morning, we've got Alex Bardell, John Booth, Patricia Barlow, and Femi Owalade Coombs. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. First, though, we're going to go to Alex Bardell, who is part of BCS's Green IT Specialist Group. Alex, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, mate. So what can you tell us exactly about what it is that you do at BCS?
So at BCS, we're the Green IT group. So really our objective is to try and promote sustainability and technology. And this really goes into two kind of fundamental areas. First bit is technology in itself in terms of how technology consumes energy, how we create all these devices which we need to recycle and reuse. And the other aspect is how can technology help us mitigate climate change? Can we use coding? Can we develop apps? Can we develop products and services that will help us along that journey to actually move away from a carbon-based economy and to really reduce our energy consumption?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we spoke about a lot yesterday in our sessions is obviously the role that technology plays. It does feel vitally important. And so where did your passion for sustainability within the IT sector come about? When did you have a kind of light bulb moment when you were like, you know what, I want to use these skills for good?
I had a couple of light bulb moments. I think the first one was when I was at school, I was really, really bad at English. And it turned out I was dyslexic or diagnosed with dyslexia. And then someone gave me a computer. And back in those days, computers were really expensive and they were quite rare. And this was a big opener for me because I could suddenly start writing. And this really, really helped me. And then I could start progressing and getting better. So I sort of carried on at school, got my A-levels, went to university. And then I started at a big technology firm. And it's really exciting to see that within the technology arena, you're based more on merit. So we had people who were apprentices, people who did H&D, vocational courses, and all of us were together. And how you progressed in these companies was really based on how good you were, rather than whether you went to the right school or had the right degree. And then probably maybe about 12 or 13 years ago, the company I was working for started an initiative that's called the House of Carbon. And we were looking at climate change. It wasn't such a big deal then. But we started thinking about how technology was consuming energy and how we could help firms and organizations reduce their energy consumption. And so from that, we created this initiative, and this really got me started. And I think the other big thing is that I became a father. And I started thinking about, how do we actually function in this world, and how can technology help us to look at our energy consumption and reduce our energy consumption? And I think for me, that was the big driver. And then since then, I've been working with the BCS and working in my own self as a consultant to try and understand how technology can firstly sort its own problems out in terms of energy and waste, but also how can technology help us to move to a low carbon, zero carbon world. And then, how would someone who was 15, 16, like I was when I was diagnosed with dyslexia, how could someone actually say, well, I want to make a difference. And, these are some of the ways that I can actually drive and motivate myself. And this is the direction I want to go on. And this is how we've got to where we are today.
Yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily think immediately about IT being kind of green in and of itself, but today is all about finding those green jobs. So what green careers are there in IT? Are there specific things that people can look at where the focus of the job is on that side of things?
I think it's really quite open right now because it's a relatively new capability. It hasn't been defined. It's not like other careers where you clearly understand what the roles are. We're still finding our way. And that kind of makes it quite exciting because it's a new opportunity. And if you were coming along into technology today, it's up to you really to help define this, what this looks like. But I would also say that green jobs in IT is a very wide basis. If you're not interested in programming or you're not super interested in technology, there's lots of roles out there, say things like digital marketing, business analyst, assessors and consultants, lots of roles which are not technical. But if you are technically minded, there's lots of opportunities. And I think it kind of goes into whether you're interested in programming. And the people on this call are probably the first generation of people who are 100% truly digital literate. But also, we need to look at some of our electronic devices. And so there's a more hands-on functional role, which is how do we make our computers, how do we make our mobiles, how do we make them last longer? And so there's a real initiative now, which is called the Right to Repair, which means that there'll be a whole group of skills of people who actually will need to repair computers and mobiles and electronic devices so they last longer.
Yeah.
And I think historically, it's been a bit of a problem. Historically, every 18 months you've bought a new mobile phone, but we can't sustain that anymore.
No, that's really, really important. Well, look, thanks very much, Alex. We're going to come to you now. Just stick with us, though, Alex, because we might have some questions from our audience at the end. Great to have you with us as well, John. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Excellent. So, John, first of all, tell us a bit about what it is that you do. What's your background?
So my background is actually, I started off as a BT apprentice back in the early 80s, and I basically learned everything about telecoms and telephones. And this was at the kind of the change from electromechanical devices to electronic devices. So it was a very exciting time. And as apprentices, we were given first dibs on what was going on, because obviously we were the guys that would be implementing and maintaining and repairing these systems moving forward. Even more so than some of the more established technicians. I then left them probably after about 8 or 9 years to become a project manager at a structured cabling firm. I've done some interesting projects globally. I've worked on steelworks, commercial offices. I've done some work with the British government and the embassies. But so my background is basically started from being a BT apprentice back in the day.
Fantastic. And when it comes to BCS and the work you do with them, it's part of your. I mean, what are the types of green technologies that BCS are kind of encouraging the use of at the moment?
Well, before we start on that, I'd just like to say how I got into being a green IT consultant. I've been a green IT consultant for 12 years. So basically, I went down to the Eden project in Cornwall. And I'd spent the day walking around the tropical biome and the semi-arid biome, the whole complex there, and you had to go out through a shop. And in the shop there was one of these. I don't know if you can see it very well.
Yeah.
This is a recycled computer board, and I remember thinking to myself, that's a terrible way for a computer to end its life, just being a mouse mat or a dinner plate placemat, and that triggered me to go into further education. So I actually then undertook an Open University degree in technology, and then started the business up in green IT. And we basically cover all of the elements that Alex was describing earlier. So we look at how an organisation is using IT, whether they can optimise their management and control processes. We look at the devices, we look at the network element, and then finally we look at the data centre. And I would say that we're probably more focused on the data center. So I've actually managed to get myself in quite a unique position where I've got connections globally, and we design and develop the standards. Coming back onto your original question, so the BCS has a kind of 10-point plan where we kind of promote the use of more environmentally friendly devices. But initially it's all about finding out where you are now and where you want to be, and then mapping a path to get in there. Very similar to a career path, I suppose. But we look at things like the amount of components that are used in devices, which has increased very rapidly from 6 in the 90s to probably over half the periodic table now. We look at the ways that they extract the raw earths and rare earths and materials, the transport and the process. I mean, did you realise that a mobile phone's components, all of the bits that go inside a mobile phone, will travel over 1 million miles before they even get to the shop? And that's just through the different components being made in one place, packaged up, taken somewhere else, and then packaged up again, and then finally assembled and then put out for trade. So our role is really to kind of highlight those practices and to smooth out the supply chain.
And do you feel hopeful that we're going to get to a place where there's less of these things being produced? People are going to start recycling and reusing things for longer. I mean, are we going to run out of the raw materials that just forces that change?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. I think it's inevitable that we're going to have to do this. Net zero and our climate goals kind of we have to start looking at this. Um, and here's an interesting fact. So the yield, so that's the amount of material you get out of a ton of mining ore for rare earths is around about 0.5 to 1%. And actually, if we go to landfills, we're getting yields of 6% on some raw materials now. So it's actually better to mine landfills than it is to actually go and physically mine.